were also told that if they came in and they had an STI, not HIV, but the other STIs, they would get treated. So there are actually there are a lot of benefits to going in the village. It's, for the most part, it's a short walk. There's a whole other part of the paper I'm not going to talk about this for reasons of time, which is they actually look at the distance you live from the clinic, but they find something similar. If you live, close by, you're very likely to go. But if you go even a little bit away, farther away, people are less likely to go. Now, if you get the cash incentive, you're willing to walk many kilometers though to come in. So there's an interesting finding. Yeah.
So what happens when people who got no incentive find out that other people did the incentive? They like go back and complain, or
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's an issue that comes up in a lot of experiments. One reason you might see this as being quite low, or one explanation for why this is quite low, is to say these folks were just like pissed off. They're like, they knew people were getting like $1, $2, $3. They got nothing. And they're like, screw you. I don't want your test result. I'm staying home. Not going to participate in this. And maybe this gap, if everybody got 0, maybe it wouldn't be 33%. Maybe it'd be 40% or something. Who knows? So that kind of demoralization effect in the control group is something I think we worry about a lot in experiments. That it's a kind of externality, right? Like being near treatment people makes me, in this case, like it changes my behavior in a negative way rather than a positive way. Now, from the point of view of Rebecca's experiment, though, if one of the things she's really interested in is a difference between this group and the other groups, it's not the worst thing for her experiment if these guys are a little bit pissed off so they don't get their test results. It's creating this kind of gap in their knowledge. But it does mean that these results may not generalize in other VCT programs. Yeah. I'm going to come to that in 2 slides. And in fact, that was my clicker question. I'm going to show you those answers. So you were like thinking exactly along the lines. So let's see what you think about it, and then we'll come back to it. So does Thornton find that HIV positive people are more or less likely to go to obtain the results of their HIV test? This is a pretty important question for VCT, right? If the HIV people are really likely to go, then you're kind of getting relevant information in their hands. If they just never go to get their test, then like it's almost like what's the point? That's a good question. This is overall, and I'll talk about the kind of subtleties about getting paid because you might imagine that that's different. This is overall. The results aren't going to be too different whether or not you're paid. They're slightly different. Okay. Okay, so this is really interesting, guys. So we've got a big spread. Some people think HIV positives are more likely to go in. Some people think HIV positives are less likely to go in. Some think it's about the same. Okay, so what is the answer? So HIV positives were much less likely to go in. This is pretty interesting. And it kind of sheds light on a couple things. Maybe the HIV positives were also more likely to refuse the test to begin with. Remember there's the 9% that didn't even allow their sample to be taken. It kind of suggests maybe there's some HIV positives concentrated in that group, although we don't have direct evidence on that. HIV positives were less likely to go in. They didn't want to hear their test results. Remember, again, this is the era before ARVs. So if I kind of suspect I'm positive, it's like, what are you going to do for me? Tell me I'm going to die? That wasn't necessarily very attractive for people. You might think in a context where there's free antiretrovirals, this would change, right? Now HIV positives have a really strong incentive, maybe to go in. But I don't know anybody who's replicated this study in the current period where there are antiretrovirals, so that's an open question. Now, there was a this question about what about if you're paid? Does that kind of narrow the gap or not? You might think it would. So one view of this is, look, if I'm not being paid, and people know I'm not being paid, and I'm HIV positive, I really don't want to go in because I'm kind of signaling that I think I'm infected. Maybe if you pay me, that gives me the excuse I need, and maybe the gap in retrieval of the test results will narrow once you pay me. But it doesn't narrow, and if anything, it gets slightly larger for that group. And that I don't think Rebecca has a very clear explanation for. So even when you pay the HIV positives, sure, they go in more than they did before, but they don't catch up to the HIV negatives. They're always less likely to get that test result. And yeah, go ahead. They only get paid the second time. So at that initial survey door to door, they're given a voucher which says if you come in to get your test result tomorrow or the next few days, you'll get paid. So they're only paid that one time. Yeah. We know everybody who gave a blood sample, that 91%, the researchers know their HIV status. That's what's so interesting about it. Even if the people don't know their status, the researchers do in this case. Eric Gong is in a similar position because Eric Gong's data was data where the researchers tested everybody, but only a subset of people came in. So it's the same kind of setup. So it's interesting. And again, the results may be context specific, but this isn't a case where when you get testing out there, all the HIV positives line up and learn their status and they're very eager to do it. If anything, they're reluctant here. So that's another important lesson. Now, there is one thing that goes in the other direction that's more optimistic, which is the following. At the end of the study, Rebecca did a second follow-up survey where she went back to people's houses with her team. And right before the clinic left the village, she said, okay, what she really wanted to do is understand how this information people were being given would affect behavior. But she can't directly measure their sexual behavior. A, she's leaving the village. B, self-reports on sexual behavior are notoriously bad. No one believes self-reports. We talked about this. People exaggerate, people understate, who knows. So she wanted what economists call a revealed preference measure. In other words, a real behavioral measure. And what she settled on is something interesting. She offered people condoms. She offered people the opportunity to buy condoms. You might say, well, what's the big deal there? There's already condoms available in these villages. She offered people money. She said, here's a few dollars. I can either give this to you in cash or in condoms or any combination of the two. So she basically priced out condoms at a below market rate. So she gave them a slightly subsidized price of condoms and said, so if you really want to buy condoms, this is a great opportunity to buy condoms. Someone's at your door in private selling you at a subsidized rate. So you can either take a few dollars in cash or you can buy the subsidized condoms. And she said, who buys the condoms basically? And she knows who's HIV positive. She knows who's HIV negative. So again, are more people who are HIV positive buying these because they're trying to protect their partners? A. B, because of the incentive, she knows who knows their own status basically and who doesn't know their own status. So she's basically saying, if I'm negative and I've learned I'm negative, do I start buying lots of condoms? And that would be an implication of the nothing to lose effect, right? If I'm positive and I learn I'm positive and I have nothing to lose, I'm going to buy a lot less. That's the nothing to lose effect. The opposite would be the altruism effect. The altruism effect is I'm positive, I find out I'm positive, I buy lots more condoms. Now I'm really worried I'm going to infect my partner. I'm negative and I learn I'm negative, I'm like, I don't need any condoms. I'm negative now. I'm not going to infect anybody. Why do I need condoms? I'm not going to infect you. I'm altruistic. Perfect question. So what does she find? I'll show you the graph this one second. So what they find is people who find out they're HIV positive were significantly more likely to buy condoms. So in terms of our two effects, theoretical effects, nothing to lose or altruism, this looks like evidence of altruism. The HIV positive people who find out they're HIV positive are buying lots more condoms. 3 times more condoms. Now, they don't buy a ton of condoms. Most people still take most of the money just as cash. Only about a quarter of the people buy any condoms at all. But the HIV positive people who find out they're HIV positive are like much more. They're buying most of the condoms. And very interestingly here, there's no gender difference in that effect. So both for HIV positive men and women, they're much more likely to buy condoms. So it's a pretty interesting finding. And again, in terms of like judging between our different theoretical effects, this is evidence more in favor of altruism. And what's nice about it is this is a real economic choice. And again, it's hard to interpret these, but when she asks about self-reported behavior, she doesn't really find much effect in terms of what types of safe sex practices do you plan to employ, et cetera. People say they are going to be very safe or pretty safe, and there's no difference based on the information you got. But the actual condom purchase changes. So, which of these should we believe? Most economists like to believe decisions when there's money on the table, but who knows, right? At the same time, there's a fear that maybe people buy the condom because they feel like, look, I got tested. Even though the enumerator, the surveyor, doesn't know my status, like they were told a million times, I don't know your test results, et cetera. Maybe the person kind of feared or thought that the surveyor knew their status and said, they know I'm positive, I really should buy these condoms or they're going to think I'm a terrible person. So they bought the condoms. It's very hard to know for sure. Do you hear that? Yeah. Each condom is like a few cents. So they're actually pretty cheap. And in general, in a lot of African countries, since the spread of HIV, condoms have been very heavily subsidized by donors. So condoms are sort of cheap at baseline in a lot of countries, and then she offered them even cheaper. So they were very cheap, the condoms. So this is actually what the data looks like. And you can't see this as well, but these are the HIV positive people on top. These are the HIV negative people at the bottom. These people did not get the results, and these people got the results in this column. So what you can see in the top is among the HIV positive people, the people that didn't get the results, about 20% of them buy condoms. But among those who got their results, it goes up a lot. It goes up like 45% or 50%. So there's a big increase in buying condoms. Among the negatives, it's about 20% for both groups, and there's no significant difference. It is kind of interesting, though, that if anything, the rate of condom purchase among the HIV positives who don't have their sort of status information is slightly lower than the negatives. That on its own would kind of argue against altruism, right? It'd be like, wait, why aren't the positives the ones who are buying condoms? But once they know their status for sure, they're basically changing their behavior. So interesting stuff, but basically consistent with there being a lot of altruism in this population, which is something I think we'd all hope for humanity, that people don't want to get other people ill in a period here where AIDS was really untreatable, basically. Yeah. Yeah, so in the data, when they ask how many partners you have, how often you have sex, et cetera, the positives and the negatives look very similar, and the people who got the result don't also look similar. So it wasn't like people's overall sexual practices looked like they were changing that much, other than this condom purchase. Yeah, Radhika. Yeah. She talks about that, and she has some results on that aren't very strong, just in part because once she restricts to the positives, who are already only 5% or 6% of the sample, who got tested, who had a certain ex ante belief, there's actually a very small number of people in that group. So her estimates are very noisy, and she basically can't say too much. I think it's one of the last tables in the paper. But very closely related to this point is the issue that if you look at the beliefs data, so you're pointing to, well, look, your baseline beliefs are going to matter a lot. The baseline beliefs look a little weird. So this is table 10, and it's worth pointing out these patterns are a little weird. They don't kind of comply with, they don't conform to what we think they would. The top panel are negatives. The bottom panel are positives. So these are negatives. Was there a hand up actually? Did you have a hand up? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. The couple incentive studies like the Devalk et al. That I know of are rural, but there's no reason you couldn't do something like that in urban areas at all. I mean, in the Devalk et al. Study, there's some towns that are kind of somewhere in between. Okay, so among the HIV negatives, I put little red boxes around certain things. The people who are negative, 43% of them think they're likely to be infected. So this is, again, just like the data is people really think they're likely to be infected at baseline. Now, among the positives, it is higher at 58%. So in other words, there's some notion that people's sense of their own risk correlates with reality, which is good to some extent, but not by nearly as much as you would think. So 43% to 57%. Now, among the people who did not get their results, when Rebecca goes back and surveys them, if anything, they think over time, the true negatives, they think they're slightly more likely to be infected. Now, that kind of makes sense. Like, if between the first survey and the second survey, I had some unprotected sex, and I'm like, oh, maybe now I am infected, but it's still about 40-something%. But among those who got their results, remember, these are negatives, they found out they're negative, their view that they're likely to be infected drops a lot. It drops down to 13%. Huge, significant drop. So there's something moving in the right direction here. It doesn't go all the way down to zero. One possibility for why is they got tested at one point, and then there was a follow-up survey later. And again, maybe in the interim, they feared, okay, yes, I was negative a month ago, but maybe now I had unprotected sex, I got infected. Maybe they don't trust the test. But at least for the negatives, it's kind of going in the right direction. Like, I found out I'm negative, now I kind of think I'm negative. For the positives, I don't know what to make of all this data. So it starts at 58%. If I didn't get my results, instead of going up over time, it falls to 46%. Can anybody think of why that might be the case? Yeah. Maybe they're in denial, they rationalize it to themselves. Yeah. Yeah, they're in a community where all this testing is going on. The vast majority of people are uninfected. I mean, the infection rate is only 6%. So they're kind of hearing, maybe like this thing isn't that big a deal, so maybe I'm not infected. So that, that makes sense. But among those who got tested, it's 0.50. It should be going up from 0.58. So that's weird. That is either A, they don't trust the test, or B, they're misrepresenting things here. So in the follow-up survey, the surveyor tells them, I don't know your status, I don't know your testing, et cetera, and they kind of just don't want to say to the surveyor, like, yeah, I think I'm infected. In fact, I know I'm infected. I was tested. They don't want to say that. It's embarrassing. They don't want the surveyor to know it. They don't want to hear themselves saying it. They don't want anybody who's kind of in the house who may be listening, and even though they try to get confidential surveys, they don't want anybody to hear them saying it. So I think that's, this points to the limitations of a lot of these self-reported beliefs, self-reported sexual behavior. These are people who know they're infected, but when you ask them in a survey, they're like, yeah, no, maybe not. That's weird. So I think, if we are going to, so Radhika's asking the question, how can we use this data? Now, there's some practical issues of sample size, but even beyond that, it's not entirely clear how to interpret all these beliefs data. They may diverge from people's real beliefs. There's another issue about this, this whole approach of voluntary testing. We've already shown that, HIV positive people aren't that likely to go in to get their results, and there's, if you don't pay people, they don't go in to get their results. So there's a couple of doubts this paper raises about voluntary counseling and testing to start with. The other thing is, it turns out it's really expensive to do one of these mobile clinic programs. So the overall cost per person who was in the VCT program was about $60. And, I got that number wrong, actually. And since only 1 in 20 people were infected, sorry, this should be $3,000. The cost per person, the cost of this program per contact with an HIV positive person is huge, right? There's only 1 out of 20 people with HIV positive. Now, you might say even testing the negatives could have an effect, and from our model, we know that. So if a lot of negatives think they're infected, testing them could still be valuable. But from the point of view of getting counseling to HIV positive people, that's a really important thing to do. This is a really expensive way to do that. So I think this paper was influential in kind of, I think, taking some of the wind out of the sails of the voluntary counseling and testing approach. Any comments or thoughts on this study, on the results? What do people think about the link to theory? Yeah. they've gotten better over time, but they're not perfect. I don't know that the odds of type 1 errors and type 2 errors off the top of my head. I think they held off on deploying these sort of portable tests until they had pretty good accuracy. But I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. So, it's not entirely crazy that some people would say, I don't know if I trust the test. There's going to be some subset of people for whom the test is wrong, but my sense would be much less than 1%. Yeah. Yeah, so I was just thinking that since only about 5% of the sample is HIV positive, the cost of the program per HIV positive person that the program reaches is like 20 times the cost per individual overall. So it starts getting quite expensive. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. I think, Rebecca has a table at the end where she starts putting out numbers like this. And again, I think we have to change our mental frame a little bit to think of the benefits of the program. If a lot of the benefits of the program aren't from reaching the HIV positives and changing their behavior, but it's from reaching the HIV negatives and kind of disabusing them of the notion that like everybody's infected, and we think that's going to be a good thing, then the program doesn't look nearly as expensive because there's a lot of value in reaching the HIV negatives. And again, it depends on the model you have in mind, but there's certainly, and we went through them, there are models where, getting someone from thinking they have an R of 43%, like a chance of being infected of 43%, down to 0 could be a good thing. It could lead to less unsafe sex. Of course, it could lead to more too. And I think that's the rub. And Willa Friedman's work, which shows that when you expand testing and you expand ARVs, people have more unsafe sex, points to the fact that there could be behavioral responses that are a little different than we expect. Yeah. Yeah, based on the condom purchase. So to the extent that we like the condom purchase, which isn't a bad measure, it's a real economic choice, then it isn't like the negatives are becoming riskier at least. So, one way of viewing this is to say, and this gets back to the $3,000 number, and this kind of motivates, I think, Rebecca's focus on some of these big numbers. Hey, the negatives aren't changing. I've got this economic choice for condom purchase. That's a pretty good measure. They're not going up or down. It's only the positives who are changing, but there's so few of them that this is so expensive, actually. If I'm only changing, I'm paying $3,000 per person whose behavior has changed, or potentially changed. So I think that's where it starts looking really expensive. This would be the cost of this one-time week program. But that's right. If you keep going back, it would cost more. You have one last word? If some of these people are having lots of unsafe sex and infecting lots of people, then maybe this is a number that makes more sense. But public health budget, per capita public health budgets are much less than that. So let's talk after. Let's wrap up. Okay, thanks guys. See you on Tuesday.